part moth, part man, but I promise he's scarier than it sounds. This world is a strange one. Mothman is a far different monster than the ones I often report sightings of. I know we often hear reports of attacks and torment by creatures like skinwalkers and wendigo and werewolves. But Mothman is an outlier, a deviant when it comes to behavior. Mothman himself is an omen of terrible or disastrous things to come. Some think he is a warning, and others believe he is the cause. Either way, you might want to drive far, far away from where he is sighted. Even still, his terrifying appearance makes any sighting of the Mothman a frightening one. So, enjoy these allegedly real Mothman encounters. But first, if you've ever wanted your experience in a video like this, I am looking for Taco Bell scary stories. It sounds both hilarious and creepy, and I'd love to share your creepiest experience from the Taco Hell. So send us your story anytime at darknessprevails.org. Now, you'd better grab your bug zapper, because the Mothman is coming. Number 1. Mothman is stalking me. Submitted by Don't Scream. I don't know where to begin. This has been happening to me for so long that I've grown quite accustomed to it. I don't want people to think I'm crazy, and I haven't told anyone this before, but I figure now is the best time to get this off of my chest. So here goes. I live in Arcadia, Michigan, back in the woods. The nearest neighbor is about a mile away. I love it out here. It's quiet, it's cozy. For anyone that's ever seen a Michigan fall, the colors are amazing. We have those backcountry roads that are barely traveled by cars, but they're amazing for walks anytime. It happened during a late fall. It was my first occurrence. I was 11 back then, and for reference, I'm now 21. I had my best friend over, and for the sake of this story, let's call her Anna. We were bored, and on Thanksgiving break, Anna and I decided we wanted to take a late-night walk. So I agreed, and we grabbed our sweaters and headed out. It wasn't that late, maybe 9 or 10. The sky was lit by a full moon, and the air smelled crisp and clean. On our walk, I decided to tell Anna about a story my aunt had. It was about an encounter she had with the supposed dogman. Anna was always scared of the dogman, and the moment I started, she already wanted to head home. I apologized to Anna, and we continued on. We got about a half-mile down the road when we stopped at an old abandoned house. This house we always passed on our walks, but never went inside. At that point, we had our backs to the main road as we walked around the house and started to walk the trail that looped around it. This trail went into a cornfield and through the woods and eventually back to my yard. Basically, let's just say it was a longer way to walk home. But again, Anna was scared, thanks to my story, and she did not want to go through the woods. I tried to calm her down, informing her that this way was much quicker, and if we turned back around now, it would be a longer walk back. She agreed to put her big girl panties on, and we continued walking. Although now that I think about it, I wish I would have flaked and walked home the normal way. We got into the woods, and that's when all the crazy stuff happened. A few seconds later, I heard a flapping of wings overhead. It wasn't birds, but it was something much bigger, something massive. I've never heard flapping so loud. I looked over at Anna, and she was frozen in her tracks with a pale look on her face. "Anna, did you hear that?" I asked in a low whisper. "Hear what?" Anna asked, with her eyes still glued to the night sky. Obviously, she had heard it too. I tugged on her hand, and she stumbled into a walk. I started walking faster, making sure to keep my head down and my hand around Anna's. I instructed her to stay with me, and I kept glancing up to see where we were going. My only thought at that time was, if I didn't see it, it wasn't real. After about 5 minutes of quick walking, we're almost home. And then we heard the flapping noise again. It sounded like a big tree branch snapped and then thudded to the ground. I squeezed Anna's hand tight, and I yelled, "Run!" We both picked up speed and we ran as fast as our legs could carry us. The woods were blurring. I heard Anna sobbing and breathing heavily behind me. But not once did I stop. I only had my eyes forward, set on the porch light I could see shining through the forest. We were almost there. I did not stop. I did not falter or stumble, because I was so terrified. The adrenaline must have kept me going. I could hear much louder steps coming from behind us, and I could hear they weren't too far either. Just as Anna and I broke through the tree line, the person or thing following us just stopped. But I practically dragged Anna inside of the house, slamming and locking the back door and shutting off the porch light. My parents were still gone for the evening. "What was that?" Anna screamed at me with spit flying from her mouth. She had her hands on her knees, bent over slightly, out of breath. I couldn't tell if she was mad at me for making her run or just simply terrified. I smashed my finger to my lips and knelt down below the window of the back door, motioning Anna to do the same. Scared, she quickly complied. We sat there for what seemed like hours, but only must have been 20 minutes. Eventually, I got the courage to stand up and look outside the window. And when I did, I saw two glowing red eyes staring back at me. I fumbled backward a bit. Anna was about to stand up as well, but I stopped her. I did not want her to see this thing, and I didn't want to see it either. And luckily, I did not see much. Whatever it was tall and black, with large wings. But what really stood out were those eyes. I stared into those eyes for a good 30 seconds, and in those seconds I felt relief, like somehow I could trust it. I reached up and I was about to unlock the door when Anna cut me off and slapped my hand. I instantly looked away from those red eyes and down at her. "What are you doing?" she whispered fiercely. I shook my head before I replied that I wasn't about to do anything. Then the sound of a car door slamming from the front of the house caused us both to shut up. Anna bolted, knowing that my parents were back home. I glanced one more time out back before leaving, but I didn't see anything back there anymore. I really wish this story ended here. Maybe for Anna it does, because as far as I know, she's never seen this thing again. I really don't walk at night anymore, and I've always been hesitant from then on out to go into the woods. But somehow, the Mothman or whatever this thing is, it seemed to only get bolder and less scared of our house. Late at night, I could hear tapping on the window, or hear the doorknobs jiggle and something trying to come through. This thing got smarter. It was never there when other people were around, only when I was alone. One night I forgot to close my blinds, and I saw the creature with his bright red eyes looking in at me. Of course, I jumped and hid under my blankets, and when I peeked out from under them, he was gone. By the time I was 19, I moved out of my parents' house. They still live there. I don't know if they've had anything happen to them, but I moved down to Florida, and ever since moving, I haven't seen the thing. Maybe he's just taking time to catch up with me. Maybe the Florida heat is too much for him. I don't know, but I hope he stays gone for good. I hear that the Mothman is an omen of things to come, and I've always wondered what his haunting meant to us. I guess one day we'll find out. Number 2. I think I saw the Mothman. Submitted by Lauren. This short experience takes place about 7 years ago. I was in my family's car driving home at about 9 p.m. It was completely dark except for the bright glow coming from the moon. I always sit behind the passenger seat, so I was on the right side of the car, for people who live in countries who have the driver's seat on the right. I was leaning against the window looking at the fields as we went by. We then got closer to the town I live in. When you enter my town from the way we were coming, you would see fields of cotton, then a road, and then homes. When we passed the road for about 2 seconds, I saw a black mass in the road dividing the fields from the homes. It stood up quickly, and then it took flight. The thing was taller than our car, putting the creature at about 6 or 7 feet tall. It also had a wingspan of about 12 feet. It all happened so quickly. I didn't think much of it until a few years later when I heard of the Mothman. The Mothman was first seen in West Virginia, but I live on the other side of the US. Even with this in mind, I still believe what I saw was the Mothman. Number 3. My Encounter, submitted by Damien D. This happened on March 31st of 2013 at my home in Georgia around 3 in the morning. I've always been a night owl. I love the peacefulness of night, especially a cold night like this one was. The night was going on like any other. I was talking with some friends on the phone while leaning out of my open window. I live next to a railroad, so I'm no stranger to loud noises. But the sound I heard, it was definitely no train. What I heard was the loudest, blood-curdling screech I've ever heard. It was loud enough that it came over my phone perfectly, causing my friends to ask what in the hell that was. It continued a few more times before I finally got curious enough to go investigate. My area is no stranger to coyotes and the occasional bear wandering down from the mountains. So I'm no fool. I grabbed my machete before I went outside, just in case what it was wasn't friendly. When I got outside, I looked around for all of 10 minutes, seeing if I could tell what it was I had been hearing. Then I began to hear the sounds of something flapping. I listened for a few moments before I finally looked up, and to this day, I still wish I never looked up. I wish I had just gone back inside. What I saw above me was a creature looking to be 7 or 8 feet tall, but its wingspan was massive, between 15 to 20 feet wide. And then there was the eyes. The eyes were the part that still sends shivers down my spine to this day. Those eyes were huge and glowing red. The creature just kept circling above me. Finally, I snapped out of whatever trance I was in, looking at this thing, and I ran back inside. Now I have 2 windows in my room, the one I was leaning out of, which faces the railroad, and the one that faces where I was outside. Both of my windows were open that night, and when I got back into my room, I could still hear the thing flying around above my house. The whole event lasted for about 15 minutes, and after that, there was dead silence. It was like whatever it was had simply vanished in midair. There was never the sound of it flying away. Everything just stopped. That's what I had thought at least, and I was wrong. Because out of the window facing the railroad are some tall trees, and when I looked out of it, there that thing was, just staring at me. Those big red eyes locked with mine. It felt like an eternity had passed, when it was more like 2 minutes. Then as suddenly as the creature had come, it was gone, and luckily I haven't seen it since that night. 4 days later, an explosion occurred at a nearby power plant. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but people were hurt. It was at that point that I realized what I had seen a few nights prior. It must have been the Mothman. Number 4. The Piney Creek Beast, submitted by Catfish Wrangler. Here in the woods and deep hollows of southern West Virginia, right in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, you can see some things that you simply can't explain. I'm an avid hunter and fisher, and I've seen just about every animal there is to see in our mountains, and on the day of June 22nd, 2016, I came into contact with the beast I hope to never cross paths with again. I had just graduated high school a month before, and I began working as a cook at an adventure resort. Because the weekends were so full of tourists from all over the country, eager to go rafting and camping and things like that, most of us employees got our days off during the week. My days off this particular week happened to be Wednesday and Thursday, and I was very much looking forward to getting some time alone. Now, I'm a friendly guy. I was really popular in high school, mostly because I was a great athlete. Now that I had graduated, none of that mattered. I still had my high school girlfriend, and about several good friends I cared to be around now, but I still prefer to be alone. I don't consider myself a loner or anything like that. I just enjoy some peace and quiet every now and again. and the best way to do that, especially during the heat of the summer, is to go fishing. I woke up that Wednesday morning right at daylight. It was a beautiful morning, and I knew it was going to be a good day. But God, was I wrong. I packed my bag full of lures, a bottle of water, some toilet paper, and my .22 Magnum. Just in case. I hopped into my 2002 Ford Ranger with my pole in the back and took off for some stream fishing. Today's destination would be Piney Creek. Piney Creek is extremely secluded. The only sign of human life along this creek is a set of railroad tracks. These tracks run parallel with the creek. This lack of human interference makes the brown trout and smallmouth bass grow to large sizes. You can walk the tracks along the creek for what seems like forever, when in reality it's around the range of 8 miles of wilderness before the creek crosses under a highway bridge. I drove down an old windy back road for quite some time, and when I finally arrived, I parked my truck in an abandoned garage. The thing sat at the mouth of the creek. Piney Creek dumps into the New River, a hotspot for rafters across the country. I locked my truck and went on my way. You have to trek your way through the brush for a little bit before you hit the tracks. The tracks and the creek finally met up, and I was on my way up the creek. I caught several fish on the way up, but the thing I loved most was the scenery. It was pristine, a creek in between 2 mountains virtually in the middle of nowhere. When the creek got too rough and deep to walk up, I returned to the tracks. I walked a while, enjoying my water, when I came across something that made me sick. It was a juvenile deer that was laying dead on the tracks. The throat, and only the throat, had been eaten away, and the deer looked mangled, like it was beat up before it had been killed. I knew a train hadn't hit it. With the dying coal industry and no coal to move, these tracks became inactive years ago. They were in bad shape, and vegetation had grown up all around them. The question remained, though, what did kill this deer? It was fresh, no flies were on it yet. It was almost as if I had scared off whatever had killed it. I decided not to worry about it too much, and I kept walking. I was maybe 3 miles in, and there was silence. No human and no nature noises. It was peculiar to say the least, but it was none of my concern. I was just looking forward to the best parts of the stream to fish. I kept walking, looking up the stream the whole time. That's when I saw it. It was on the other side of the creek, about 40 yards up the stream. I'm 6'2", and this thing easily had a foot over me. It was built like a man, muscular and slender at the same time. It had brownish black skin or hair and piercing red eyes. Its hands were behind its back. Those red eyes were focused down toward the water, and it was like this creature was focused on watching fish swim in the creek. I let out a semi-quiet, instinctual, "What the hell?" and the creature immediately turned its attention toward me. It sent chills down my spine. The beast removed its hands from its back, revealing its claws and giant wings. I watched it, and it watched me. Then I began to slowly back away, and it just watched. All in the meantime, I never lost eye contact with it, and once I got out of sight, I began a dead run back to my truck. I ran for what must have been 2 miles straight, as fast as I possibly could. I figured I made some distance between me and it, and I stopped to breathe for a second and to think about what had just happened. I turned around, and that thing is about 50 yards away from me, just standing on the tracks. I began to feel terrified and mad. How did this thing keep up with me without me even hearing it? And then I remembered. I pulled out my .22 mag from my bag, and I fired into the air a warning shot. I screamed as loud as I could. The thing let out a hiss combined with some sort of shriek, and it pierced my ears with pain. The creature then spread its wings and flew straight into the air like it was gliding. It went into the air and out of sight. I turned and I simply ran. I made it back to my truck, jumped in, threw it into gear, and I never looked back. When I made it home, I did some research, and all the evidence I saw led me to one creature, the Mothman. I live within 100 miles of Point Pleasant, where the Mothman was first sighted. Many say he's an omen, that he warns you when bad things are about to happen. The strangest thing is, the next day, June 23, 2016, a large flood hit southern West Virginia and it devastated the land. Communities were destroyed and people were hurt. I just wonder if this creature they call Mothman was trying to warn me, or if he was the cause of the calamity. Number 5. The Mothman. Submitted by Luis A. I guess the best place to begin is to explain what I was doing. I was heading to Mexico to visit my grandparents with my mother so that we could drive back to where we live and they could visit us as well in 2014. On the way there, I was listening to music and playing a game on my phone as my mom drove the car. It was around 2 in the morning and we had passed the border around 12. There were no other cars on the narrow road that we were driving down. In addition, it was pitch black besides our headlights. Now, as I was playing my game, I began to get a little bored of the song I had on repeat and decided to change it up. I remembered that I found a song I wanted to show my mom, so I reached up to the dashboard to grab the auxiliary cord. As I grabbed the aux cord, there is a white dot that I noticed out in the sky. Confused by not being able to understand what it is, I stared at it quietly. It seemed as if even the engine of the car got toned out, because it was like everything went silent, and I couldn't even hear myself breathing. Staring, I realized that the dot began to expand. It looked like a drunk bird flying in the sky, struggling to keep itself up in the air. The thing was so white and pale. About 8 seconds passed from when I had first noticed it, although to me it felt like a minute. The closer the animal got to the vehicle, I could tell that it was no bird. The thing looked like it was made of skin and bone with no feathers at all. The pale white color was probably because of the car's headlights, now that I think of it. I remember the moment that I finally moved, because it was the moment that it was about to smack right into our car. It unfolded its wings and in a split second took one huge flap before narrowly missing the top of the car. The wingspan of this creature was at least twice the width of our vehicle. I looked over to my mom and asked her if she was okay. She replied, "I don't know. I think I just saw something really bad." Shivers covered my whole body, and I got goosebumps. Finally, I replied to her, "Me too." About 10 seconds after the creature had passed us, the air began to stench of sulfur. Right as I was going to ask my mom what the smell was, she said, "You know, demons are supposed to leave the smell of sulfur after having passed over people, right?" I was terrified. Once we got to my aunt's house where there was internet after visiting my grandma, I researched pictures of huge pale bats, and I soon found images of the Mothman. He was just as pale in the pictures and had no feathers. It had similar features as well, like having a head connected to the body with no neck. It was definitely him. That's what we saw. I then saw a picture of a statue that somewhat resembled it. The statue was in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It had its arms separated from the wings, and the wings were a little bit longer with holes in them, as if they were an actual moth. I know what we saw that night must have been the Mothman. But what does the sighting mean? And what could be coming ahead? And number 6. It was playing with us. Submitted by RAVIN. The story takes place in Northeast Kentucky in 2006. I was 19 years old. I think I should mention that I am a gay male, and I was with my boyfriend, now husband, in my old pickup truck. Late at night around 12, after a wonderful date we had just finished, we were on the road driving to the next town over because this is where my boyfriend, let's call him Aaron, lived. This trip between towns normally took an hour. It went along nearly abandoned back roads that cut right through the immensely thick woods almost like a temperate rainforest. At the time, both me and Aaron loved all things occult and all things creepy, including urban legends, myths, as well as all creepypasta. And as we expected, we both were quite paranoid and cautious, so basically we have street smarts. We were on the first 25 minutes or so of the drive, and it began to rain. And I mean it was pouring cats and dogs out there, so I turned on my headlights. This made the drive all the more enjoyable and creepy to us. As we were enjoying the creepy vibe of the nearly abandoned back roads, I'm fighting hard with the wet and intensely muddy roads. 10 minutes later, I get this awful feeling. Hairs on the end of my neck like you're being watched, and this immensely strong nauseous feeling. I fought off the feeling and I swallowed hard. I gasped to Aaron, Do you feel that? I took my eyes off of the road, which was starting to clear of the mud, and I turned to him, who was extremely pale, nearly deathly pale, and he answers, Yeah, that feeling like you're being watched. Not bothering to answer, I turned my eyes back to the road, and not 20 freaking yards away stood this thing. It was definitely not human, and it wasn't any kind of animal I've ever seen. I smashed on the brakes and I skidded to a halt. We just stared at this thing for what seemed like hours. It was about 7 or 8 feet tall, near jet black with massive wings, and the wingspan was huge. I'd have to say 20 or 25 feet, and those freaking eyes were the worst. They were red, blood red. I looked closer to see that it didn't have any feathers. Its wings were just completely smooth. The thing moved, and it seemed to knock us back into reality. Aaron yelled at me to hit it, and I floored the car. But before we moved even 5 feet, the thing extended its wings, making them look so much more massive, and it launched itself into the air really fast. It was so quick, I had a hard time following it with my eyes. All I saw was a black blur, vanishing into the darkness and out of the range of my headlights. Not wasting a moment, I floored it, and the car had a hard time getting traction, but after a few seconds the wheels caught in the muddy road, and we were soon hurrying along the slightly winding road. Then all we could hear was flapping. I pushed the car harder and harder. We must have been going 55 in heavy rain and mud, and this thing had no problem keeping pace with us. Suddenly, Aaron mumbled, "Mothman." The moment he said it, it all came flooding in. The urban legend of the Mothman, a murderous flying creature that stalks Kentucky and other nearby states, an omen of death. And at this point, me and Aaron are crying and are terrified, literally fearing for our lives. I was jerked from my thoughts when I hear thumping on the roof of the truck and a grinding and scratching. Upon hearing this, I looked in the mirrors, and I regret that decision right away. I can see the thing's face, and I scream, nearly losing control of the truck. Luckily, the sudden jerking of the vehicle threw the thing off. Not a minute later, we hit the main road, and the truck gained even more traction, so we sped down the road at nearly 90 miles an hour. Soon, Aaron quietly asked me if it was gone, and I looked in my mirrors to check if it was. And it wasn't. It was just hardly keeping pace, but it was all the same. This kept up for about 10 more minutes, the thing following us. But as we were only 5 minutes away from the next town, it suddenly flew off, and it was out of sight. It was hard to force myself to ease up on the gas, but after a while we were going 45 again. I finally told Aaron that I think it's gone, and I kept a watchful eye on the sky just in case. Soon we were in town, and we arrived at Aaron's house. He begged me to stay with him because we were both scared, and he knew this, so I agreed. Still scared, we went to bed, trying our best to try to get some sleep. Both of us are still positive that this was the Mothman. We also never take back roads anymore. This experience has truly affected us both. Later, that very next morning, I took a look at my truck's roof and found 6 deep, long, and terrifying gouges. This thing could have peeled the roof back off of the truck, if it was serious enough. But truly, I just think that it was playing games with us. This thought horrifies me. Just think of what it could do if it actually tried. It could have easily killed us, and that really scares me. Also, later, I realized that this thing made no noise besides the flapping of its wings. This whole event was eerily silent, and this makes it all the more horrifying to me. I just hope the two of us never see that thing again. Whether you think the Mothman is an entity out to protect us, or a demon out to sabotage our world, he is a terrifying sight to behold. But the worst part must be the suspense, the mystery as to what is coming next. Because once you see the Mothman, life becomes a waiting game, waiting to see what mass death might come for you. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget, Send us your Taco Bell horror story soon at darknessprevails.org. Thanks.